Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rainmakers Roundup. I'm your host, Mark Iorio, and I have with me today Deborah Frazier. Deborah is a financial advisor, wealth management for HighTower Wealth Management. How are you?
I'm fine, Mark. How are you?
Great. Good to have you on the program.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. It's been a long time. You're an old hat at this. I mean, you've been doing lots and lots of shows in your life and TV programs and everything, so you're pretty comfortable with this, right?
Well, it's always until you do it today, you know?
Oh, gosh. Listen, I love talking about this with you. You know, wealth advisory, wealth management, and your career. The idea of, you know, when you went to college, did you always think that you were going to be in wealth advisory or financial advisory when you were growing up?
When I was growing up and when I first went to college, I had no idea that even existed. I mean, that was something that we kind of heard about. It wasn't a part of my world, which is really the underlying motivation for me to leave Indiana, where I grew up, and to move to New York. Specifically, I moved because I was determined to learn about money and to understand how to save it and invest it and use it wisely, because no one in my environment really had money. You know, it was a low-income family, low-income environment. People, everyone had a nice home and they took care of their families. But that was pretty much it. They didn't understand about money.
Right.
And that was my determination and my motivation for relocating.
That's a strong motivation. It really is. It's when you see people that are working hard, that are good family people, but you see this other world out there, and you know, you kind of wonder, why is my circle of influence not involved in this, right? And so this heartbeat, this passion that you have to go and learn more about finance and about money starts to drive you. What was the sort of turning point in your life? When did you start to really feel like you wanted to drive toward this career?
Oh, wow. You know, until you just asked that question, I would have never thought of sharing it. But actually, we lost my second brother. And that was a turning point in my life. It made me look at everything differently. Yeah. And then I felt that I had been blessed with, you know, a very inquisitive mind and the ability to learn and study and apply myself. And I just realized I had to do something much bigger. I saw so many of my family members suffering. I had these nieces and nephews. I really wanted to make a difference in their life. Sure. And I just had to have a larger platform to do that. And so I really did spend months trying to figure out, where could I go? What was it I needed to do? And I read the book, What Color is Your Aura? And I went through all the different things that I had. Yeah. And the most valuable part was identifying what was missing. Right. And what was missing constantly was related to money and understanding money. Yeah. And so then I determined, well, if I'm going to learn about money, I want to do it at the best place. So I determined that would be either Merrill Lynch or E.F. Hutton at the time. Right, sure. And they were headquartered in New York. And I said, well, if I'm going to learn, I'm going to the headquarters. And that's what I did. God so that's how I figured it out. That's great. You know, I think about people who are trailblazers and people who've changed the way, you know, conventional wisdom is, conventional thinking is. I think of people who are in the arts or in music or in some other, you know, disruptive business, right? And I think of people who are not supportive of them, and how many people, even their own voices sometimes in their head saying, you know, what are you doing? What do you think you're doing? Or why do you think you're going to break through this? When you started on this path, Deborah, what was that like for you? I mean, in terms of, you know, you thinking about, you know, going into finance, did people always support you? And what was that like? So, Mark, I find often when people meet you, they just assume that you are who you are, and you've always been that person. You know, I was very much a different person. I was just a young girl from Gary, Indiana.
Yeah.
You know, I was smart, but I hadn't been exposed to things, but I had a really curious mind.
Sure.
And when I said that I was going to New York, and when I got to New York, I stayed with a cousin, and they were asking me where was I planning to work, and I said, well, I'm going to apply to Merrill Lynch. And they looked at me like I was out of my mind. They were like, Merrill Lynch? You'll never get hired by Merrill Lynch. And actually, Human Resources did reject me, but I went in another way. I had met a realtor, and he asked me what was I planning on doing, and I said I want to work at Merrill. And he said, oh, I have a friend who's executive vice president there. She says she's always looking for good people. I'll introduce you.
No kidding.
So the day I started at Merrill, I came home and my rejection letter from Merrill was there in the mail. But I was already hired.
Wow, good for you.
So, you know, you have to, so I've done that all of my life.
All your life,
But
yeah.
when I first said that I wanted to be, so I was at Merrill Lynch for a total of 28 years. And the first 5 years I was in operations and legal and estate transfer. That's where I determined I wanted to become a financial advisor. And when I went to, again, to Human Resources and said I want to become a financial advisor, they literally laughed in my face. I don't mean chuckle, they laughed.
Did they really?
They did. So people, you know, as many people that were like that, there were other people always in my circle that said, Deb, you can do anything you want to do.
Right.
I've seen you can do anything you want to do.
Sure.
And so I found out what it would really take, and I prepared myself. I knew that the Series 7 was a really hard exam.
Yeah.
And so I did an independent study, taught it to myself, and that was my test. I said, if I can pass this exam, then I can be a financial advisor.
Right.
And I did.
Wow.
So, so I would say as many people who discouraged me, you know, those who really love me, and my mother, number one, encouraged me to do everything that I could.
That's
so
great.
that love just always kept me going.
Kept you going, right,
Yeah.
exactly. You know, when you have family like that, and especially your mom, I mean, it's pretty amazing that, you know, they're always behind you. They never, it's like your parents never fail you, right, or your mom never fails you. When people tell you that, when that human resource person laughed at you and said, when you said, I want to be a financial advisor, what did that feel like inside? It was like, I think of Michael Jordan getting cut as a junior in high school. I played college baseball. I got cut as a sophomore. It has a pretty powerful impact and effect on you, doesn't it?
It does, because, you know, what I always do is I just smile quietly and I go to work.
Yeah.
That person had nothing to do, or those people had nothing to do with what my plans were.
Right.
And so I executed on the strategy that I had figured out for myself. Yeah. And then later, when things weren't, you know, it's very tough to be a financial advisor, especially if you're African American. Yeah. So I feel that I was a real pioneer, because at this time, this was in the mid 80s, and there were very few female financial advisors.
Absolutely, yeah.
In all of the offices that I worked, there was never more than one other female of color in the office with me. Usually I was the only one.
Right.
And, you know, Merrill trained financial advisors. Merrill was the premier trainer. So they trained between 100 and 300 maybe financial advisors a month. And 70% of those bailed out, weren't there a year later. And if you were African American, the failure rate was closer to 90%.
Wow.
After 5 years, if you were still there as a financial advisor, you represented 0.5%. So you had 1,001 chance of still being a financial advisor as African American after 5 years.
Wow.
In 10 years, I was one of 52 in the country that had been an FA at Merrill consecutively for 10 years.
Wow.
And I ran my practice for 20 years while I was at Merrill.
Good for
so I
you.
don't even know where I was at 20 years. But it was a tough, competitive, male-dominated, white male-dominated industry. And there were a lot of reasons for that. And one of the biggest reasons is who controls the wealth.
Right. Yeah.
You have to be able to convince people who are wealthy that they can trust you.
Right. Yeah.
with helping them to manage their money,
Sure.
their family.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so much.
Yeah.
And so I always feel that the skills I learned growing up in an African American community,
yeah.
you know, there were, I had 6 siblings, so I was from a big family.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone in the neighborhood had 5 to 10 kids. All of our families pretty much were 2-family households.
Sure.
It was very competitive because it was so much fun.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, my real skill set was running. I was a real runner.
Were you? Yeah.
And running teaches you a lot of things.
It does.
Endurance, competitiveness.
Yes.
We played board games all the time. So I was the queen of the board games. And we learned to golf. We learned to play tennis. We learned to fish. We learned to, we had big sand dunes by Lake Michigan.
Sure.
So later in life, when I became a hiker and a rock climber, people were like, how are you even interested in that? But I was doing that when I
you
was
were a
5,
little girl,
6, 7, 8 years old.
Exactly.
Swimming, you know, I still swim all the time.
Yeah.
And people tease me, you're black, how do you swim?
Oh my God.
So everything, all of the things that we did, all of the life skills that you need and how to interact with people, you learn all those things, it just comes in a different form.
Right.
So, and even that stick-to-itiveness, you know.
Yes.
And I think my mother really was the role model for that.
Mm-hmm.
But when times were so hard at Merrill Lynch and starting out as a financial advisor, it's all of those things that I drew on.
Yeah.
And my faith has always been a close part of me.
Sure.
So no matter where I lived in the world,
Yeah.
I've always sought out a way to find a church where I could worship
Yeah.
and be a part of.
Right.
And the church that I'm at now, when, you know, I'll mention in a minute, but when we came back from when we were living in London, we found the church that I'm at now. So that was 2008. So I've been there 12, almost 13 years.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's a big part of my life. I'm a big part of the church.
Yeah.
You know.
Faith is such an important
Yeah.
part of who we are as people, and it helps us during tough times. A lot of times, as you're going through difficulties in life, and you know those challenges that you had to face as an African American female at Merrill Lynch when everything was pretty much dominated by older white males. Was, you know, you have to sit back every once in a while and say a prayer and think to yourself, you know, I need your help.
Oh, you better.
Right? A lot. You say that a lot. We're going to have to take a quick break. I feel like, you know, when you meet someone like you, Deborah, I can talk to you for hours about this. Unfortunately, we have 30 minutes, so we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll come right back, talk to you more about what you're doing with HighTower, what you really learned at Merrill, and how that prepared you for what you're doing today, okay?
Great.
We'll be right back after a message from our sponsors. Please don't go away.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. You know, but it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, you know, she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello, that's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
sidewalks built for fun. Legendary rock and roll clubs.
This is how we do it. Hippity hop.
Casinos by the ocean.
Hippity hop.
Now that's New Jersey. 130 miles of beautiful beach.
Welcome back to Rainmakers Roundup. I'm your host, Mark Iorio. I'm with Deborah Frazier. Deborah is a wealth advisor for HighTower. Thank you for joining us here on RVN. Great story. I love it. It's not a story, it's your life. And I so appreciate what you've come from and where you are and this unbelievable career that you had at Merrill Lynch. Tell me tell us what you learned at Merrill that prepared you for where you are today, Deborah.
Okay, that's a great question, Mark. You know, I've mentioned some of my experiences at Merrill, but overall, I have to say, Merrill Lynch taught me so much, and I was afforded so many opportunities. Even if I had to fight to get them, I was afforded some amazing opportunities in life, and in my role as financial advisor, because it exposed me to all sorts of people. And there are just so many examples, but a turning point in my career as a financial advisor, one turning point was when I belonged to the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce at that time, and they were sponsoring a trip to Israel with Bar Ilan University, the Brooklyn Borough President, and the Brooklyn Chamber. And I went on the trip. Wow. And it was just when Kuwait, when first Bush had sent troops over to Kuwait. Yeah. So maybe 40% of the plane was occupied, and I went on that trip. And because I had the courage and the boldness to do that, when I came back, pretty much everyone on the bus was a client of mine, and including the chairman of the Brooklyn Chamber. Wow! And he and his wife just adored me, and so he invited me in. He invited me in. He introduced me around. I started sitting on committees, economic development, budget and finance. Then they invited me to be a board member. And over the next, say, 16 years, I probably got 70 to 80% of my clients out of the Brooklyn Chamber because of going on that trip. And then I went on a trip with one of my clients to South Africa. And he was the former, he was a bishop in the AME church. Okay. And during the years of apartheid, he and his wife ran the only institution that stayed in black hands. So I took that trip. That had a big impact on my life. Wow. And then later, when I really needed to make a difference, and I had to figure out what was it that could give me a big leap and add to my credibility, I knew I needed to further my education. And so I set myself sights on an Ivy League school, Columbia, and I got into the executive MBA program there. Wow. So that was an accelerated academic program. You did 4 years and 21 months. Wow. By then, my son was 2 years old. Wow. So I was a single mother. I adopted my son when he was 3 weeks old. Wow. So at 2 years old, I was a single mother in this full-time executive MBA program as a full-time financial advisor. Yeah. It was the most exhilarating experience. We had a global trip to Hong Kong, Shanghai, and Singapore. And so all of these experiences are helping to educate you. Yeah. So after 20 years, for all the different reasons, when I decided to step out of production as a FA, I wanted to do something that I'd been dreaming about all my life, which was to live in another country, specifically to live in England, in London. And so I had the opportunity to do that. So I became the first resident practice management coach for the EMEA region, Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, for Merrill. Sure. And I coached, trained, and developed financial advisors who were on teams in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. Wow. So I had 10 different countries that I was responsible for. Jeez. And so they were thrilled to get me because no one who was a practice management coach had 20 years experience as a financial advisor. Yeah. So I had a lot of credibility. Sure. But what they didn't know is I also had great coaching skills because my background was in teaching, but when I talk about developing myself, there was always a parallel path. So in the background, I was always doing work with Landmark Education. I've been doing work with them for like 30 years off and on.
Yeah.
And I took all of their leadership, coaching, mentoring, all those opportunities. So when I went over to coach, when I came back 3 years later, because I went for 2 and they asked me to stay a third, when I came back, the head of the UK London region said that I was the person who had made the biggest contribution to the entire region in the last 20 years.
Wow, wow.
So I helped them develop their first $10 million team. When I went there, the team was doing 3.4.
Wow.
Through my coaching, they did 10 million, and when I left, they were tracking on 12.
Wow.
I helped them bring in the first $1 billion client by setting up a cross-country relationship between the Milan office and the Paris office.
Okay.
So I really had a big impact.
Sure.
But it was because I could have a big impact on the behavior of people
Yeah.
and help bring out the best in them.
Yeah.
So that was fun. And we got to travel. You know, I love to travel. So we were just all over Europe, all over Africa. And when we went to Dubai, and when they asked me to do a coaching session in Beirut, I couldn't believe it. But, you know, those are opportunities
That's
that I had
amazing.
as financial advisor.
Yeah, that is That's really impressive,
Yeah.
and I think about how risky some of that is. Those behaviors where you say to yourself, "I'm going to pick up and I'm going to move to another country with a son, a 2-year-old
Yeah,
son."
people thought well, he wasn't 2 then. He was 10 then.
Okay.
But when I got my MBA, the executive
Yeah,
MBA,
he
he
was
was
2.
So when we moved to London, he was 10.
He was 10.
And when we came back, he was 13.
Tell me about HighTower, right? And why you're so incredibly passionate about helping people with their financial life, and advisory.
So helping people is really just an extension from, I've always helped people. And then I learned a profession, and so those skills and talents and characteristics just come with it.
Sure.
So, and I love to teach. And I think that's one of the reasons I'm able to gain trust with my clients so quickly, is because I'm a great planner and I'm a great teacher.
Yeah.
And I help them really, even things that they may not verbalize, I help them to put words into those things that they're thinking about, what they want for their family,
Yeah.
and what's the best way to get there. So this is the third wealth management practice I've been a part of.
Yep.
So I ran my own for 20.
Yeah.
And then later when I came back from London, I created a practice that I ran for 5 years.
Okay.
I was with RBC Wealth Management and Morgan Stanley. Then I coached a nonprofit tennis organization for under-resourced youth.
Yes.
So that was another experience. And then, I came back to what I love, which is wealth management. So one of LaRue R. Gibson runs our team, LRG Wealth Advisors. Those
Right.
are his initials.
Yep.
LaRue and I go back, way back to when we were financial advisors starting out in Merrill Lynch. And when LaRue found out that I had a desire to come back into wealth management, he welcomed me into his team. And I think he's been in business about 35 years. He was
Okay.
at Merrill for about 32, and then he moved to HighTower.
Yeah.
So HighTower is a registered investment advisory firm, an IRA firm, and they are distinguished from a broker-dealer by the fact that we're all fiduciaries.
Okay.
Meaning that we have the responsibility to put our clients first, which is what you should do anyway.
Right.
But it's not just a best practice, it's what we're legally obligated to do.
Yeah.
And, it's not just words. It's really what you
It's
must
actions,
do. It's
exactly.
actions, right.
How do you approach a new client? What are some of the questions that you typically go through, you ask when you're, onboarding a new client? And why do you think, look, Merrill was a great company for a long time.
Yeah.
Some people feel very strongly about the Bank of America thing, but we'll leave that part out of this conversation. But in terms of what HighTower does, you feel that might be a little different than, or your approach, or LaRue's approach to how you onboard a new client. What's that like?
Well, HighTower has brought together a large group of independent independently minded financial advisor
Yeah.
with their practices. And they started out in 2008. They're headquartered in Chicago. They have over $100 billion in assets under management. We are a part of that. So LaRue joined that HighTower team. Our team, one of the things I'm most proud about our team, Mark, is we are a fully diverse wealth management team. And in all the years I've been in financial services, it's rare that you'll find a team that's led by an African American.
Yeah.
There are 3 African Americans on our team,
Yeah.
1 Asian, 1 white, 3 males, 2 males, 3 females. So we're really a diverse team.
Yeah.
We all have degrees from Ivy League school, so
Yeah.
we're a well-educated team. We have Yale, MIT, LaRue went to Yale, MIT, Boston College, Rutgers, Columbia.
Sure.
And we lead with planning. So HighTower, LRG Wealth Advisors, Deborah Frazier, we all have a holistic approach to working with our clients. We always lead with planning, and that's where every relationship starts. So even if a client, say, moved $5 million to us, we wouldn't start really allocating that money until we did a formal financial plan with them.
Right.
Because that's where you really understand what the goals and dreams are.
What are some of the biggest mistakes that you think that investors, or not investors, but people make? They're not yet investors. You know, they come to the table and there's a lot of times there's confusion. So what do you think happens oftentimes in people's minds?
So, Mark, people can be very wealthy and still be afraid to make decisions about their wealth. And they may be an engineer, they may be well-versed in whatever their industry is, but they just never spent a lot of time on the financial side. And they're afraid of making a mistake, so maybe they won't do anything at all.
Yeah.
They love it when they sit down with someone
Sure.
who helps them with the planning side.
Yeah.
Because they know the things that they should do, but we help them take that big step.
Yeah.
So our clients have, we specialize in working with corporate executives, small business owners, wealthy individuals. Our clients usually have $1 million in investable assets. That may be a part of their investment portfolio, their retirement accounts, all of the things put together. I have the RICP designation, which is Retirement Income Certified Professional.
Yeah.
And that means that I've been trained to really help people with the retirement side, especially when they begin to take money out of their accounts and on the distribution end.
Sure.
How are you going to create the income stream that you're going to need to sustain you for the rest of your life?
Yeah.
So that's what that designation is about.
Yeah.
But we start out at the very beginning. Retirement comes up a lot because no matter what your age is, that's kind of what you're always
It is.
planning
You're always
for.
thinking about that. Yeah.
So what type of retirement account is appropriate for you? We've had a lot of changes with rules on retirement with the CARES Act and with the Secure Act in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Especially around required mandatory distributions. So we help clients figure that out. We help them figure out how to diversify their income stream in retirement. So even if you're saving in a 401k account, let's say, those are before tax dollars, so you're saving on taxes and the money grows tax deferred.
Right.
When it comes out, it's coming out taxable.
Taxable, yeah.
But maybe if you have a designated Roth IRA within that 401k program, maybe it's a good idea to pay some taxes, fund your Roth IRA with after-tax dollars, but when you take them out in the future, that's going to be tax-free income.
Right.
So now you're diversifying your future income stream. So we help clients work through all kind of questions like that.
Great. Great.
And our team manages over $400 million for our clients.
Wow.
And as I said, there are 5 of us. We're planners, and the corporate executives that we work with, whatever the category is, you have different sets of things that are going to be important to you,
Yeah.
and we're qualified to help you make decisions with all
Great.
of those.
Your offices are up in?
We're headquartered in New York, 505 Fifth Avenue.
Yep.
Of course, we're all working remotely.
Sure.
I work with a number of very wealthy families here in New Jersey, so I work remotely, you know, even when we were going to the office, I probably only
Yeah,
went
you were, yeah.
once or twice a week.
Right.
Because my base is here in New Jersey.
Got it. Thank you.
We're done? Thank you,
Yeah,
Mark.
we're not quite done. I have one question for you. Where do you find inspiration? Since you're such an inspiration to so many people, and I sit here and as I said earlier, I could talk to you for 2 hours, but we have a 30-minute show. But where do you find inspiration?
I do find inspiration from my faith, but I also find inspiration in just other people because I love learning about people, and people are so fascinating.
Yeah.
You know, if you just take some time and listen to them
Yeah.
and pay attention to them. So other people inspire me all the time. I do all types of activities. I'm on boards. You know,
Yeah, you are.
I'm on a lot of boards. I'm hoping to become a board of trustee member for the New Jersey Symphony Orchestra pretty
Great.
soon.
Great.
And I'm on a national committee for the USTA, the United States Tennis Association.
Yeah.
So I just keep opening my life, and the inspiration just keeps
God
coming
bless
in.
you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome, Deborah. Tell everyone, if you look in that camera right there, where to get in touch or how to get in touch with you.
You can reach me by email at dfrazier@HighTowerAdvisors.com. So that's DFRAZIER at HighTower, HIGHTOWERADVISORS.com. Or you can reach me by cell at 732-213-2159.
Great. Deborah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome. My pleasure. What an inspirational interview with Deborah Frazier. Thanks so much for joining us on RVN TV this morning, our Rainmakers Roundup. We'll see you next time. Have a wonderful and safe week, everyone.